There is a mistake ordinary people make at the start of every great financial storm. They think the danger begins when the headlines become frightening. It does not. By the time the television is screaming, by the time the experts are drawing red arrows and using the word crisis every 7 minutes, by the time your neighbor suddenly becomes interested in treasury bills and asks whether he should sell everything, the real separation has already happened. The separation happened months earlier. It happened in the quiet. It happened when one person looked at a rising paycheck and thought, "Good, I can finally spend more." And another person looked at the very same paycheck and thought, "Good, I can finally build more dry powder." That difference looks small in ordinary times in a storm. It decides who gets blown over and who ends up buying the wreckage. I learned a very long time ago that wealth is not a trophy for being optimistic. It is not a medal you receive for sounding intelligent at dinner. It is not even a reward for being right in public. I have seen brilliant men go broke because they confused intelligence with emotional discipline. I have seen simple people become very wealthy because they understood one thing clearly. Survival comes first, liquidity comes second. Only then do bargains matter. That order never changes. And when I look out at 2026, I see an enormous number of people trying to reverse it. They want the bargain first. They want the hot stock first. They want the story first. They want the feeling first. They want to be told that every decline is a buying opportunity while leaving themselves no cash, no margin of safety, no emotional room, and no ability to withstand a bad 6 months without selling something they should have kept. That is not investing. That is cosplay in a bull market. Real investing begins when the sky darkens and you are still calm enough to count. I want to tell you as plainly as I can what I believe is happening, what I believe matters, and what I would do if I were looking at my household from scratch today. Not because I enjoy alarming people, I do not. Fear is a terrible teacher, but arithmetic is an excellent one, and arithmetic is what we are dealing with now. The first thing you must understand is that storms almost never arrive wearing the label people expect. Most people are still waiting for a recession to look the way the last recession looked. They want a familiar villain. They want a neat explanation. They want one chart, one headline, one date, one moment they can point to later and say, that was the turning point. Life is not kind enough to give you that simplicity. What usually happens is much more subtle and much more dangerous. Pressure builds in several places at once. Growth softens, hiring weakens, costs rise, confidence falls. Asset prices become detached from reality. Debt that was easy to carry when rates were low becomes heavy when cash flow tightens. Consumers continue spending for a while because habits always lag reality. Companies keep projecting confidence because managers are paid to sound composed. Politicians keep promising relief because politicians are paid to keep hope alive. And then one day the same people who spent 2 years telling you everything was fine begin talking about caution as if they had always seen it coming. I have no interest in that game. I prefer to look at systems because systems tell you where the pressure really is. And the system I see today is fragile in exactly the way overconfident. Societies always become fragile. The economy is carrying more debt than people psychologically understand. Small businesses are more nervous than headlines. Admit consumers are tired in a way numbers often capture late. Housing is not healthy just because prices are high. High prices are not proof of health. Sometimes they are proof of strain. Oil is not just oil. It is transportation. It is food. It is shipping. It is chemicals. It is heat. It is fertilizer. It is industrial rhythm. When energy rises sharply, it does not politely stay in one corner of the economy. It moves through the entire body like fever. The people who feel it last in spreadsheets feel it first at the gas pump, at the grocery store, on a utility bill, and in the quiet panic that comes from realizing their paycheck did not grow as fast as their obligations. That matters more than most people think because recessions are rarely just events. They are behavior changes. A family that feels secure upgrades the car. A family that feels uncertain delays the purchase. A household that trusts the future books the trip. A household that senses danger starts hoarding small decisions. Restaurants notice that. Retailers notice that. Travel notices that. And by the time economists call it a slowdown, ordinary people have already been living it for months. So when people ask me whether a recession is definitely coming, I think they are asking the wrong question. The right question is this: are you currently living in a way that requires everything to go right? Because that is the true danger signal. If your life only works when income arrives on schedule, when the market stays cooperative, when no major repair shows up, when no one gets sick, when no contract gets cut, when no bonus disappears, when no tenant leaves, when no rate resets, when no surprise tax bill arrives, then you do not have a financial life. You have a fair weather costume. The reason wealthy people survive storms better than everyone else is not that they predict the weather with supernatural precision. It is that they do not build lives that collapse at the first drop in pressure. I want to give you a better way to think about this. Most people believe prosperity is the size of the river flowing into their lives. That is wrong. Prosperity is the size of the reservoir you built before the river flows. I have watched people double their income and somehow become twice as fragile. Why? Because they translated every improvement in earnings into a new permanent obligation, a larger mortgage, a more expensive car, 3 new subscriptions they barely notice, restaurants because they are tired, conveniences because they are busy, status purchases because they want life to feel like progress. I understand all of that. The trap is emotional before it is mathematical. You work hard, you get tired, you tell yourself the money should make life easier, and it should. But there is a difference between making life easier and making yourself weaker. Every recurring expense is a quiet vote for what kind of future you are willing to require. If your spending rises automatically every time your income rises, you are not becoming more successful. You are becoming more difficult to rescue. This is the first mechanism I want you to understand. Lifestyle inflation is not just spending. It is the slow replacement of freedom with upkeep. The car is not the problem. The problem is the monthly burden attached to the car. The house is not the problem. The problem is the fact that the house demands a certain version of your future labor to remain standing. The nice life people display in good times often turns out to be nothing more than a series of claims on tomorrow. And claims on tomorrow become very heavy in a downturn. That leads to the second mechanism. Debt is future labor sold in advance. I want you to sit with that because most people never really do. Debt is not a number on a statement. Debt is a slice of future life already promised away. Every minimum payment is time you no longer control. Every high interest balance is compound interest working as a machine against your freedom. People hear that and nod as if it is obvious, then they go right back to carrying balances at rates that would embarrass a loan shark from a century ago. A person with a $4,000 credit card balance at ruinous interest will often tell me the number is manageable, but they are measuring the problem incorrectly. The issue is not what the balance is. The issue is what the balance is stealing. It is stealing options. It is stealing calm. It is stealing future compounding. It is stealing the ability to say yes later because you insisted on saying yes too quickly earlier when times get tight. Interest does not get sympathetic. It keeps running when hours get cut. The interest keeps running when business slows. The interest keeps running when the market falls and you need liquidity most. The interest keeps running. That is why I tell people to get lean before they get clever. Lean people are harder to bully. Hard times bully leverage people first. This is not philosophy. It is just sequence. First you build the coat. Then you walk into the rain, not the other way around. Now let me move to what I think is the most misunderstood distinction in finance. The market is not the economy. Those two things shake hands, but they are not twins. The economy is production, hiring, earnings, wages, orders, inventories, margins, consumption, logistics. The market is expectation, mood, crowd psychology, positioning, narratives, and the price people are willing to pay today for an imagined tomorrow. That difference matters enormously because people have spent the last several years acting as though high prices themselves are evidence of safety. They are not. Sometimes high prices are the greatest risk in the room. If you pay too much for anything, even something excellent, your future return becomes fragile. I watched this happen in the late stages of the internet. Boom. The technology was real. The eventual transformation was real. The excitement was real. What was not real were the prices people were paying for the privilege of being adjacent to that future. They were paying today as though perfection were guaranteed for a decade. Perfection is never guaranteed for a week. When I look at parts of today's market, especially the areas where AI enthusiasm has become a substitute for valuation discipline, I do not see evil companies or worthless businesses. That is not my point. I see price tags that assume a degree of flawless execution that history almost never grants. Good businesses can still be terrible investments at foolish prices. That sentence would save people a lot of money if they believed it emotionally, as much as they claim to believe it intellectually. Because when crowds are euphoric, price stops feeling like risk and starts feeling like validation. People want what has already gone up because rising prices make them feel safer. That is one of the most expensive instinctive errors human beings make. The third mechanism is this. Crowds do not buy value. Crowds buy social proof. That is why the same investors who say they want bargains often feel physically sick when real bargains actually appear. A bargain in markets almost always arrives in an ugly wrapper. It arrives with bad news. It arrives with declining prices. It arrives with people around you saying, this time is different. It arrives with your phone feeding you panic every 6 minutes. And the only way you can take advantage of that moment is if you prepared before it, not during it. Before it. This is why cash matters so much. Cash is not laziness. Cash is deferred power. Cash is the ability to think slowly, while others are forced to think quickly. Cash is what lets you separate a temporary markdown from permanent damage. Cash is what keeps you from selling what you should keep. Cash is what lets you buy when good assets are being thrown overboard to meet some other person's immediate need for liquidity. I was able to buy in 2008 not because I became brave in the middle of chaos. I was able to buy because I had spent years getting comfortable with the idea that looking inactive in the good times is often the price of being decisive in the bad times. People love to celebrate aggression during rallies. I have always had more respect for restraint. Restraint is what leaves you with dry powder. Dry powder is what turns a panic into an invitation. Let me make this even more practical. If your income stopped tomorrow, how many months could you continue to live without selling an investment, without carrying a new balance, and without relying on a hopeful assumption? I do not want the flattering answer. I want the true one. For many people, the honest answer is under 3 months. For some, it is less than 1. And if that is you, then I am going to save you from 1,000 interesting conversations about markets, valuations, sectors, and opportunities. None of them matter yet. Your first and only serious objective is a 6-month cash cushion. Not because I think 6 is magic, because 6 is enough to restore dignity to your decision-making. A person with 6 months of true liquidity behaves differently. They read the same headlines differently, they negotiate differently, they invest differently, they sleep differently. They do not need every day to cooperate. And that reduction in desperation changes everything. This is the operating system I would build if I were starting with ordinary income in this exact environment. First, I would know my number, not approximately. Exactly. I would calculate my monthly survival cost, not my fantasy cost and not the number I use when I want to feel disciplined, but the actual number required to keep my life functioning with basic dignity. Second, I would eliminate the bleed. I would list every debt by interest rate and attack the most punishing first. I would list every recurring charge and ask one brutal question. Does this expense genuinely improve my life, or has it simply become background noise I am financing with future labor? Third, I would automate cash accumulation. I would not rely on motivation. I would rely on system design. The moment money hits the account, a portion should disappear into safety before my emotions get a vote. That is how adults protect themselves from their own optimism. Fourth, and only after those were underway, I would begin preparing to buy. Not indiscriminately, not because stocks are down, not because some talking head said the dip is a gift. I would prepare by building a watch list of actual businesses or broad funds I understand. I would study balance sheets. I would study competitive advantages. I would study pricing power. I would study debt loads. I would know what I would be happy to own if the market handed me a real markdown. So when the moment came, I would not be reacting. I would be executing. That is a very different psychological position. Most people meet a downturn with no protocol. That is why they become part of someone else's opportunity. I want to say something else that matters more now than in most periods. Your attention is under attack. The modern financial media system is not designed to make you wealthy. It is designed to make you engaged. And fear is the most profitable form of engagement ever invented. Fear of missing out during rallies. Fear of losing everything during corrections. Fear of not acting. Fear of acting too late. Fear of being the fool. Fear of being left behind. If you let that machine train your nervous system, it will make rational investing almost impossible, because the machine is selling agitation, not judgment. I would reduce my consumption of market noise dramatically in any environment like this, not because information is useless, because most of what passes for information during a volatile period is just sentiment wearing a necktie. Ask yourself this every time you read or watch financial content. Does this improve my estimate of long-term value? Or does it just improve someone else's ad revenue by making me emotional? If it is the second, close it. A great deal of wealth is simply the product of ignoring invitations to panic. That brings me to something even deeper. The fourth mechanism is identity. People do not just mismanage money, they mismanage the story they tell themselves about money. One person sees cash and thinks, I am behind because I am not fully invested. Another person sees cash and thinks, I am dangerous because I can act. One person sees a market decline and thinks, I am losing. Another person sees the same decline and thinks, the menu is getting cheaper. One person sees reduced spending as deprivation. Another sees it as retaining command over future choices. The external facts matter, but the internal interpretation often matters more. I have lived in the same house for most of my life. That fact fascinates people far more than it should. They treat it like a personality quirk. It is not a quirk, it is a signal. I have never wanted my life organized around proving something to strangers. That is a very expensive addiction. The world is full of people trying to look rich while remaining structurally fragile. I have always preferred being hard to shake, and being hard to shake is what lets patience turn into fortune. If you want a blueprint for the next 90 days, I will give it to you plainly. Spend the first 30 days auditing reality. Know every expense, know every balance, know every interest rate, know every source of cash flow, know exactly how far your current reserves would take you. Do not round, do not guess, do not comfort yourself. The truth is always more useful than the story. Spend the second 30 days tightening the machine. Cut what should be cut. Refinance what can be refinanced. Negotiate what can be negotiated. Redirect every extra dollar toward either high-interest debt destruction or cash reserve construction. No heroics, no complicated optimization, just structural improvement. Spend the third 30 days studying your future purchases, not memes, not predictions, not what is fashionable. Study the assets you would be proud to own if they became available at sane prices. Make your list before fear creates the discount. If you do those three things, honestly, you will already be ahead of the vast majority of people before the market gives anyone a dramatic reason to care. And if the storm weakens or arrives later than expected, fine preparation still pays. Cash still has value. Debt reduction still has value. Better habits still have value. A stronger balance sheet is never wasted. That is what sensible preparation looks like. It works whether the storm comes early, late, hard, or soft. Now let me close with the one distinction that sits under everything else. Wealth is not accumulation for its own sake. Wealth is not a scoreboard. Wealth is not luxury consumption with better packaging. Wealth is control over your time, control over your standards, control over your ability to walk away from bad deals, bad jobs, bad pressures, bad timing, and bad panic. That control is built in humble decisions long before it becomes visible in big numbers. The people who come out of recession stronger are usually not the flashiest people. They are the ones who quietly refuse to spend everything they could have spent. They are the ones who kept some powder dry while others demanded constant excitement. They are the ones who understood that security is not cowardice. Security is ammunition. The wealth gap that opens in bad times is not born in the middle of the crisis. It is born in the calm beforehand. It is born when looking honestly at your life is still optional. It is born when you still have time to build the coat, reinforce the levee, clear the debt, and stack the cash. So here is the mirror I want to hold up to you. If the market fell hard over the next 6 months, if your income was interrupted, if opportunity finally arrived in the form that usually scares everyone else away, would you be forced to protect yourself, or would you be able to deploy? That answer tells you more about your future than any forecast, and here is the final test. For the next week, act as if the storm already has a name, not dramatically, not fearfully, methodically. Count your months of runway, find the bleed, cut the noise, automate the reserve, write down the assets you would be proud to buy if fear discounted them. Then sign a private contract with your future self. A simple one. If the storm comes, I will not be the person selling good assets because I failed to prepare in quiet weather. I will be the person with the coat on. I will be the person who can wait. I will be the person who can think. I will be the person who can buy. That is how fortunes survive. That is how fortunes are built. And that is how the people who saw the storm before it had a name end up owning more of the world after it passes.